A sudden winter storm has left your town snowbound for weeks. Roads are impassable, and the power has been out for days. Imagine relying on simple, natural methods to keep fresh eggs for years without a fridge. The Amish have mastered this with ingenious techniques, from coating eggs in beeswax to burying them in wood ash. Could these time-tested methods be the key to long-term food security? Water glassing. Deep in the hills of Lancaster County, Pennsylvania, an Amish family gathers around a worn wooden table. It's early summer, and the hens have been laying abundantly. The youngest child of the family carefully carries a basket full of eggs into the kitchen, while the mother prepares a large earthenware crock. On the counter sits a bag of pickling lime, which this Amish family uses to preserve their eggs for years on end. For those who don't know what water glassing is, it's a time-tested method for preserving eggs, using a simple mixture of water and pickling lime, calcium hydroxide. When fresh, unwashed eggs are submerged in this solution, the lime creates an airtight seal on the porous shells, blocking out air and bacteria. The result? Eggs that stay fresh for a very long time without refrigeration. For the Amish, this technique is more than a practical solution. It's part of their seasonal routine. In Lancaster County, where winter brings bitter cold and shorter days, water-glassed eggs are a staple. By late spring, large crocks of preserved eggs line the shelves of cool basements, ready to sustain the family when the hens slow their laying. The process requires care. Only unwashed eggs with intact shells are used, as their natural bloom is essential to success. I remember visiting a small homestead outside Bird-in-Hand, Pennsylvania, where an Amish woman proudly showed me her water glassing setup. The crock was tucked into a dimly lit pantry, surrounded by rows of canned vegetables and dried herbs. She cracked open an egg she'd preserved nearly 8 months earlier. It looked and smelled as fresh as one straight from the coop. If this is something you'd like to try at home, start with unwashed, fresh eggs. These are critical because the natural bloom on the shell acts as an additional barrier against spoilage. In a clean, food-safe container, mix 1 ounce of pickling lime with 1 quart of water. Stir the mixture until the lime dissolves into a cloudy solution. Carefully place the eggs in the container, ensuring they're fully submerged. Cover the container to keep out debris and store it in a cool, dark place, like a basement or pantry. Months later, when you need eggs for cooking or baking, simply rinse off the lime solution, and the eggs will be as good as new. The first time I tried water glassing, I'll admit I was nervous. Would the eggs really last? But months later, pulling out one of those perfectly preserved eggs for a batch of cookies felt like discovering hidden treasure. If submerging eggs in lime water sounds ingenious, wait until you see how a simple layer of oil can transform an egg into a long-lasting pantry food item. Oiling. Oiling eggs is a straightforward preservation method. By applying a thin coat of oil to the shell, it creates a barrier that prevents air and bacteria from entering. This slows the natural degradation process, keeping the eggs fresh for several months. The Amish often use lard or tallow, sustainable byproducts of their livestock, but modern households might opt for mineral oil or even coconut oil. This method fits seamlessly into the Amish way of life, where nothing goes to waste. In Holmes County, a region known for its harsh winters, oiled eggs become a reliable food source for the Amish families when trips to town are impractical. The eggs are stored in cool, dark spaces like root cellars, their protective coating ensuring they remain ready for use in everything from hearty breakfasts to baked treats. I once stayed with a family who swore by this method. The grandmother showed me her storage baskets, each lined with straw and filled with perfectly oiled eggs. "These will get us through the winter," she said with a smile, her hands still slick from the lard. It struck me how something so simple could feel so profound. A small act of preparation, that spoke volumes about self-reliance. To replicate this method, begin with clean, unwashed eggs. Choose your oil based on what's available. Mineral oil is a common choice, but lard, olive oil or coconut oil are excellent alternatives. Warm the oil slightly if needed, and use a soft cloth or your hands to coat each egg thoroughly, ensuring every inch of the shell is covered. Once coated, place the eggs in a carton, basket or shallow container and store them in a cool, dark spot like a pantry or cellar. Rotate the eggs occasionally to keep the oil evenly distributed. When you're ready to use them, simply wash the shell under warm water before cracking it open. When I tried oiling eggs for the first time, I felt a strange sense of accomplishment. Seeing them stored neatly in a basket on the counter gave me a connection to simpler times. A reminder that sometimes the old ways really are the best ways. But oil isn't the only natural barrier. Imagine using beeswax, a gift from nature, to keep your eggs fresh and ready for months. Beeswax coating. In the picturesque farmlands of Holmes County, Ohio, beehives are a common sight among Amish homesteads. The soft hum of honeybees fills the air, and the golden bounty they produce serves many purposes beyond sweetening a cup of tea. One lesser-known use? Beeswax, an invaluable resource for preserving eggs. Beeswax coating is a simple yet highly effective method. By brushing a thin layer of melted beeswax onto the eggshell, you create an airtight barrier that prevents oxygen and bacteria from penetrating. This process locks in the eggs' freshness, keeping them viable for up to a year. On an Amish farm, the process is straightforward. After collecting fresh, unwashed eggs, the beeswax is melted down in a small pot over a wood-burning stove. Once liquefied, each egg is gently brushed with the wax, then placed on a wire rack to cool. The result is a collection of eggs that not only look beautifully polished, but are also ready to be stored in a cool pantry for months on end. I once visited an Amish beekeeper who showed me how this was done. Her hands moved deftly, coating each egg with a practiced ease. She told me how her family relied on this method during particularly long winters when fresh eggs weren't readily available. Seeing the jars of honey and blocks of wax she had harvested from her own bees made the process feel almost magical. If this is a method you'd want to try, start by melting food-grade beeswax in a double boiler or a heat-proof bowl over simmering water. Make sure the eggs you're using are fresh and unwashed, as the natural bloom on the shell will add an extra layer of protection. Using a soft brush, gently coat each egg with a thin, even layer of the melted beeswax. Allow the eggs to cool completely before storing them in a carton or basket in a cool, dark place, like a pantry or cellar. When it's time to use an egg, simply scrape or wash off the wax, and it's ready to cook. Now, for a method even simpler than beeswax but just as effective, let's explore the power of lime water. Storing in lime water. Particularly in the heart of Lancaster County, Pennsylvania, Amish households often turn to lime water as a go-to preservation method. The process is deceptively simple, but its effectiveness makes it a staple in many homes. Lime water, made from slaked lime and water, creates an alkaline environment that slows the growth of bacteria and keeps eggs fresh for a very long time. Unlike beeswax coating, which requires beeswax, this method uses slaked lime, a more readily available alternative. The mixture is prepared in large earthenware crocks, where eggs are carefully submerged and stored for months. An Amish woman I met in Lancaster County shared how her family has relied on lime water for decades. She showed me her crock, tucked neatly into a corner of her root cellar. "It's a tradition that works," she said with a smile, holding up an egg she had preserved 8 months prior. The egg was flawless, and she cracked it into a pan to demonstrate, its yolk still vibrant and fresh. And the best part is it's very simple to do. To store eggs in lime water, you'll need fresh, unwashed eggs, slaked lime, also known as calcium hydroxide, and a food-safe container. Start by mixing 1 ounce of slaked lime with 1 quart of water in the container, stirring until the lime dissolves. Carefully place the eggs into the solution, ensuring they're fully submerged. Cover the container with a lid to keep out dust and store it in a cool, dark place like a pantry or basement. When you're ready to use the eggs, rinse them thoroughly under cool water to remove any lime residue. This method is perfect for those who want a no-fuss way to preserve eggs, and it's surprisingly easy to incorporate into modern kitchens. Speaking of simplicity, how about using something that's already in your wood stove? Ash might just be the unsung hero of egg preservation. Dry packing in wood ash. Dry packing is as straightforward as it sounds. The process involves storing fresh, unwashed eggs in a box filled with fine, sifted wood ash. The ash acts as a natural desiccant, drawing out moisture and creating an environment that discourages bacterial growth. For the Amish, this technique is both sustainable and convenient, as wood ash is readily available from their stoves, especially during the colder months. In an Amish home, you might find these ash-filled boxes tucked away in a cool, dry cellar. The eggs are carefully nestled into the ash, one at a time, until they're fully surrounded. It's a method that relies on patience and precision, as even the slightest crack in an eggshell can compromise the process. Yet when done correctly, this approach keeps eggs fresh for up to 6 months, long enough to bridge the gap between seasons. To use this method, start by gathering clean, unwashed eggs. Next, sift wood ash to ensure it's fine and free of large particles. You can use ash from a wood-burning stove or fireplace, but make sure it's free of additives like lighter fluid or chemicals. Fill a sturdy box or container with a layer of ash about 1 inch deep. Place the eggs in the ash, spacing them out so they don't touch. Gently cover the eggs with more ash until they're completely buried. Store the box in a cool, dry place, like a basement or pantry. When I tried this method, I was surprised by how low maintenance it was. Months later, cracking open one of those ash-preserved eggs felt like unearthing a little time capsule. Proof that sometimes the simplest methods really are the best. But what if you're looking for a preservation technique with a bit of culinary flair? Let's see what salt can do. Salt curing. Salt curing works by drawing out moisture from the eggshell, creating an environment where bacteria and spoilage have little chance to thrive. The Amish favour this method for its simplicity and effectiveness. Salt is a staple in their homes, used not only for cooking, but also for preserving everything from meats to vegetables. Adding eggs to the mix is a logical extension of their resourceful lifestyle. On the outskirts of Paradise, Pennsylvania, a small Amish homestead thrives with timeless techniques. In the kitchen, a large wooden barrel sits on the floor, filled with coarse, shimmering salt. The matriarch of the family gently buries a batch of fresh eggs into the salty grains, ensuring each one is completely covered. It's a preservation method passed down through generations, requiring little more than the natural power of salt. In Amish households, barrels or large containers of salt-cured eggs are often kept in root cellars. The process is quick and requires little supervision, making it ideal for busy families who need reliable food storage solutions. And when the eggs are needed, a quick rinse is all it takes to bring them back to their ready-to-use state. To salt-cure eggs, start with clean, unwashed eggs and a container filled with coarse salt. Pour a thick layer of salt into the bottom of the container, then gently place the eggs on top, spacing them out so they don't touch. Cover the eggs completely with more salt, ensuring no part of the shell is exposed. Store the container in a cool, dry place, like a pantry or root cellar. When you're ready to use an egg, simply rinse off the salt under running water. The egg will be as fresh as the day it was cured, perfect for cooking or baking. The first time I encountered salt curing was during a visit to a friend's homestead. Trying it myself later, I couldn't help but feel a sense of accomplishment, knowing I was carrying on a tradition that sustained people for centuries. Salt curing is practical, but pickling adds flavour to the mix. Pickling eggs. In the bustling kitchens of an Amish community in Smicksburg, Pennsylvania, the aroma of vinegar and spices fills the air. It's canning season, and along with fruits and vegetables, jars of pickled eggs are being prepared with care. Pickling is more than a preservation method here, it's a beloved tradition, creating a flavourful, long-lasting treat that's as practical as it is delicious. Pickling eggs begins with hard boiling them, ensuring the shells are peeled off cleanly. The eggs are then placed in jars filled with a brine made from vinegar, water and salt, often enhanced with spices like mustard seeds, cloves or garlic. Some families even add a beet or two to the brine, giving the eggs a vibrant, deep red hue. Once sealed, the jars are stored in cool pantries, ready to be enjoyed for months. The Amish favour this method not only for its preservation benefits, but also for its versatility. Pickled eggs are a popular addition to meals, often served alongside hearty soups or stews. They're also a staple snack for farmers, needing a quick burst of protein during long days in the field. I once stayed at an Amish homestead in Smicksburg and was offered a pickled egg during supper. The tangy flavour and firm texture were unlike anything I'd tasted before. These were pickled 6 months ago, the mother of the family said, smiling as she passed the jar around. It amazed me how something so simple could taste so fresh and full of life. To pickle eggs at home, start by boiling a dozen eggs until they're hard cooked. Cool them in ice water, then peel off the shells. Meanwhile, prepare your brine by simmering a mixture of 1 cup of vinegar, 1 cup of water, and 2 tablespoons of salt. For added flavour, toss in your favourite spices. Peppercorns, dill, and even a pinch of sugar can elevate the taste. Place the peeled eggs in a sterilised jar and pour the hot brine over them until they're fully submerged. Seal the jar tightly and let it cool to room temperature before storing it in the refrigerator or a cool pantry. The eggs will be ready to eat in about a week, though they'll keep for months if stored properly. Speaking of flavours, did you know honey, a natural preservative, can also work wonders for eggs? Preserving in honey. Preserving eggs in honey might sound unconventional, but it works because honey is naturally antibacterial and hygroscopic, meaning it absorbs moisture and inhibits bacterial growth. The process involves submerging clean, unwashed eggs in a jar of honey, ensuring they're completely coated and sealed. The Amish, known for their resourcefulness, often turn to this method in households where bees are kept. It's not a common practice, but for families with an abundance of honey, it's an ingenious way to preserve eggs, while also adding a subtle sweetness to their shells. In the rolling hills of Geauga County, Ohio, an Amish beekeeper tends to her hives as the golden honey flows into jars. Beyond its sweetness, honey serves another purpose in these communities. It's a natural preservative, used for everything from fruit to, surprisingly, eggs. During a visit to a small Amish farm in Geauga County, I saw this method firsthand. The beekeeper explained how her great-grandmother had used honey preservation during particularly harsh winters, when other supplies ran low. The honey preserves the eggs and gives them a unique flavour, she said, cracking one open to show its pristine interior. To preserve eggs in honey, start with clean, unwashed eggs and a jar of raw, unfiltered honey. Place a layer of honey in the bottom of the jar, then gently add an egg, ensuring it's fully surrounded by honey. Continue layering eggs and honey until the jar is full, leaving a little space at the top. Seal the jar tightly and store it in a cool, dark place. When it's time to use an egg, simply remove it from the honey, rinse off any residue, and use it as you normally would. The honey can be reused for cooking or sweetening, making this method both practical and deliciously sustainable. There's something remarkable about relying on nature's sweetest creation to preserve something as humble as an egg. It's a small act of ingenuity that feels both timeless and entirely relevant today. But not all methods involve sweet solutions. Let's explore how freezing, without a fridge, can keep your eggs fresh. Freezing without refrigeration. In the frosty winters of northern Indiana, where the snow piles high and the air is crisp, the Amish have found an ingenious way to preserve eggs using nothing more than the freezing temperatures outside. This method, often referred to as ice block storage, allows eggs to be kept fresh for months without relying on modern refrigeration. The process begins with packing eggs into insulated containers, sometimes wooden crates lined with straw or sawdust. These containers are placed outdoors or in ice houses, where blocks of frozen lake or pond ice are stacked around them. The ice, collected during the coldest weeks of winter, acts as a natural refrigerator, maintaining a consistent temperature that prevents the eggs from spoiling. For the Amish, who often have access to frozen bodies of water and ample storage space, this method is practical and sustainable. It's also part of a larger tradition of harvesting ice for food preservation, a skill passed down through generations. During my visit to an Amish farm near Shipshewana, Indiana, I witnessed the ice harvesting process. Teams of men worked together, cutting and transporting large blocks of ice from a nearby lake. If you live in a cold climate, you can replicate this method during the winter months. Start by placing fresh, unwashed eggs in a sturdy container. Line the container with straw, sawdust, or even old towels to provide insulation. Then surround the container with blocks of ice, either purchased or naturally collected. Keep the setup in a shaded, sheltered area to prevent the ice from melting too quickly. As temperatures rise, you'll need to replace the ice periodically to maintain the cold environment. This method is ideal for those looking to embrace a more off-grid lifestyle or prepare for emergencies during winter. Trying this method made me realize just how much we take modern refrigeration for granted. There's something satisfying about using the natural chill of winter to preserve food. It connects you to the rhythms of the seasons in a way few modern conveniences can. If freezing seems straightforward, here's a twist: turning eggs into powder for long-term storage. Dehydrating eggs. Though not traditionally used on a large basis by the Amish due to its energy requirements, dehydrating eggs is a fascinating option for long-term storage. This method involves whisking eggs, drying them into a fine powder, and sealing them in airtight containers. The result? Lightweight, shelf-stable eggs that can last for years. Some Amish families experimenting with modern adaptations try dehydrating eggs as part of their community project. They might use a solar-powered dehydrator, one of the few modern tools embraced by some off-grid communities, to preserve surplus eggs during the peak laying season. The process starts by cracking the eggs into a bowl, whisking them thoroughly, and spreading the mixture onto dehydrator trays. Once dried, the eggs are powdered and stored in airtight jars or vacuum-sealed bags. While not a widespread practice among the Amish, it's easy to see how this method aligns with their values of reducing waste and maximizing resources. Dehydrating eggs requires a dehydrator or a low-temperature oven. Begin by whisking fresh eggs until the yolks and whites are fully combined. Pour the mixture onto non-stick dehydrator sheets or parchment paper-lined trays, spreading it evenly. Set the dehydrator to 135 degree Celsius, 8.7 degrees Celsius, or use your oven on its lowest setting. The drying process can take 8 to 12 hours depending on the equipment. Once the eggs are dry and brittle, break them into pieces and blend them into a fine powder using a food processor. Store the powder in airtight containers away from light and moisture. To rehydrate, simply mix 1 tablespoon of egg powder with 2 tablespoons of water for each egg. I once used the powder to make scrambled eggs. The flavour was surprisingly fresh. This method is a game changer for those looking to build a pantry that's ready for anything, from everyday cooking to unexpected emergencies. Modern methods are great, but let's step back to the basics with an old-fashioned approach using lard. Coating with lard or tallow. In the quiet mornings of Lancaster County, Pennsylvania, the sight of Amish farmers rendering fat from freshly butchered livestock is not uncommon. This process yields not only a valuable cooking ingredient, but also a critical tool for preserving eggs. Using lard or tallow to coat eggs is one of the simplest yet most effective preservation techniques the Amish employ. The method is straightforward. Rendered fat is gently warmed to a liquid state, then used to coat fresh, unwashed eggs. The fat creates an airtight seal around the shell, preventing oxygen and bacteria from entering. This barrier keeps the eggs fresh for months, even without refrigeration. On an Amish homestead, the process is often a family affair. During a visit to a farm outside Bird-in-Hand, Pennsylvania, I watched as children took turns carefully brushing the melted fat onto the eggs, while their mother explained the importance of using unwashed eggs. "The bloom on the shell is nature's first defense," she said. "The lard just strengthens it." Once coated, the eggs were placed in baskets lined with straw and stored in the family's cool root cellar. When I first tried this method, I couldn't help but admire its simplicity. There's a certain satisfaction in knowing you've preserved food using nothing but natural ingredients. To try this method, start with unwashed eggs. Keeping the natural bloom intact is essential. Melt a small amount of lard or tallow in a saucepan over low heat until it becomes liquid. Let it cool slightly so it's warm, but not hot. Using a soft cloth or your hands, gently coat each egg with a thin layer of the fat, making sure every part of the shell is covered. Once coated, store the eggs in a cool, dark place like a pantry or cellar. For best results, rotate the eggs every couple of weeks to ensure the fat remains evenly distributed. But if lard isn't your style, how about charcoal? It's not just for barbecues, it's an unexpected egg saver. Burying in charcoal. In the more unconventional corners of Amish tradition lies an intriguing technique: burying eggs in charcoal. While not as commonly practiced as other methods, this approach leverages the natural properties of charcoal to create a preservation system that absorbs moisture and inhibits bacterial growth. Charcoal has been used for centuries as a natural desiccant, capable of drawing out moisture and keeping stored items dry. For preserving eggs, the Amish pack them into containers filled with finely crushed charcoal, ensuring each egg is surrounded and insulated. This creates a dry, protective environment that significantly slows spoilage. I first learned about this method during a conversation with an Amish elder in Holmes County, Ohio. He described how his family would use the leftover charcoal from their wood stoves to preserve not only eggs, but also root vegetables and other perishables. "It's not something everyone does," he said, "but it works when you have the right conditions." The charcoal not only preserved the eggs, but also added a layer of intrigue to the process. It's an unconventional technique, but one that highlights the endless creativity of natural preservation methods. To replicate this method, start by sourcing clean, finely crushed charcoal. Avoid using charcoal briquettes, as they often contain additives or chemicals. Fresh, unwashed eggs work best for this method due to their natural bloom. Fill a container with a layer of charcoal and place the eggs on top, ensuring they don't touch each other. Add another layer of charcoal to completely cover the eggs, repeating until the container is full. Store the container in a cool, dry place. When you're ready to use an egg, simply brush off the charcoal, and it's good to go. For a method that's even simpler, yet highly effective, all you need is a piece of cloth and some vinegar. Wrapping in cloth dipped in vinegar or alcohol. During a visit to an Amish homestead in Middlefield, Ohio, I witnessed this process firsthand. The family was preparing eggs for storage after a bountiful laying season. The father explained how wrapping the eggs individually allowed them to stay fresh for weeks, even in fluctuating temperatures. It was fascinating to see how something as simple as a vinegar-soaked cloth could transform an egg into a shelf-stable food item. On a chilly autumn evening in the heart of Amish country, a family prepares for the colder months by employing a surprisingly simple yet ingenious preservation method. In the warm glow of an oil lamp, cloth strips are dipped into bowls of vinegar and carefully wrapped around fresh eggs. This method, while not as widely known as others, offers a quick and effective way to keep eggs fresh for extended periods, particularly in emergencies. The Amish value this technique for its straightforwardness and adaptability. Vinegar and alcohol both act as natural antibacterial agents, creating an environment that prevents spoilage. By soaking cloth in either liquid, the Amish ensure that each egg is protected from harmful bacteria, extending its shelf life. This method is particularly useful in times of uncertainty or when refrigeration isn't an option. I tried this method during a camping trip and it was a game changer. Having fresh eggs on hand without the need for a cooler felt like a small victory in the battle against food spoilage. It's perfect for situations where convenience meets necessity, and it's surprisingly easy to execute. If you're interested in this method, start with clean, unwashed eggs. Prepare strips of cloth, old cotton or linen works well, and soak them in either vinegar or food-grade alcohol. Wring out the excess liquid, then wrap each egg individually, ensuring the entire shell is covered. Once wrapped, place the eggs in a basket or shallow container, ensuring they aren't stacked or pressed too closely together. Store the container in a cool, dry place, like a pantry or cellar. When you're ready to use an egg, simply unwrap it and rinse off any residue before cooking. But if you're drawn to more natural materials, let's see how clay or mud can turn an egg into a long-term food item. Storing in clay or mud. I first learned about this technique while visiting an Amish farm in the Conestoga Valley. The farmer's wife showed me a basket of clay-coated eggs stored neatly on a shelf in their cellar. She explained how the method had been passed down through generations, helping their family weather harsh winters and unpredictable harvests. This ancient method, often overlooked in modern times, aligns perfectly with the Amish ethos of using natural materials. By creating a barrier around the eggshell, the clay slows down the aging process and prevents contamination. Eggs preserved this way can last for months, making it a practical choice for households without access to refrigeration. The process is simple yet effective. Fresh, unwashed eggs are coated in clay or mud and allowed to dry completely. Once hardened, the eggs are stored in cool, dark places, such as root cellars or pantries. The Amish often use this method during the warmer months, when hens are most productive, to ensure a steady supply of eggs throughout the year. In the rural outskirts of Lancaster County, Pennsylvania, where farmland stretches for miles, an Amish family gathers clay from the nearby creek. They mix it with just enough water to form a pliable paste, then begin coating freshly laid eggs with the mud-like mixture. Once dry, the clay hardens into a protective shell, effectively sealing the eggs from air and bacteria. To store eggs in clay, you'll need fresh, unwashed eggs and a natural clay or mud mixture. Combine clay powder, available at garden or craft stores, with enough water to form a thick paste. Gently roll each egg in the mixture until it's fully coated, then place the eggs on a drying rack. Allow them to dry completely. This can take a day or two depending on humidity. Once the clay has hardened, store the eggs in a basket or container in a cool, dark place. To use the eggs, simply crack the clay shell and rinse off any remaining residue before cooking. The first time I tried this method, I couldn't believe how sturdy the clay coating felt. It was like creating a tiny fortress around each egg, protecting it from the elements. And finally, one of the easiest and most practical methods: burying eggs in sand or sawdust for effortless preservation. Burying in sand or sawdust. In the woodworking shops of Amish communities, sawdust is an abundant byproduct, but instead of being discarded, it's often repurposed for food preservation, including storing eggs. Sand and sawdust act as natural insulators, protecting eggs from temperature fluctuations and physical damage while keeping them fresh for months. On an Amish farm in Michigan, I saw this method in action. A barrel of fine sawdust sat near the family's root cellar, filled with layers of eggs carefully buried inside. The farmer explained how the sawdust kept the eggs cool and cushioned, preventing them from spoiling even during warmer months. The process is straightforward. Fresh, unwashed eggs are placed in a container surrounded by clean, dry sawdust or sand. Each egg is nestled into its own little pocket, completely covered to block out light and moisture. This low-tech approach is a testament to the Amish philosophy of using what's readily available and wasting nothing. And the best part is it's very easy to replicate this method. Start with clean, dry sand or sawdust. Avoid any material that has been treated with chemicals or contains debris. Fill a sturdy container with a layer of sand or sawdust about an inch deep. Gently place the eggs on top, spacing them out so they don't touch, and cover them completely with more sand or sawdust. Store the container in a cool, dry place, such as a basement or pantry. When you need an egg, simply brush off the sand or sawdust and it's ready to use. This method surprised me with how easy it was to set up. There's a certain charm in knowing you can use simple materials, often things you already have on hand, to preserve food effectively. It's a perfect blend of practicality and old-world wisdom.